And what's behind us here, seeing a steel plant where folks are working, that doesn't happen by accident. It happens when the steelworkers come together with folks like the mayor to keep and preserve and create those kinds of jobs. I'm also honored to be here with Leo Gerard, someone I've known a long time. I'm going to be introducing him in a couple of minutes. We're grateful for his leadership on so many issues, and as well as I want to thank Jim Johnson for being here as well. Jim, you'll be the fourth speaker, and we're grateful to be here at your local and to be in the community. I come here today to talk about a very important issue, but also to express gratitude, not only for the people that are here with us today, but to the people of Braddock and the people of this county who have been very kind to me in my time as a public official and as a candidate. And I was reminded coming in here today, or even actually last night, traveling from Washington last night, about a little personal story. I'll make it very brief, but when my father was in office as governor, after running 4 times, that's a long road to be governor, and the Braddocks and the people of Braddock were among the folks that helped him get there. But one of the things he wanted to do was to remind people, to remind the state and to remind future occupants of the office of governor who built this country, that workers built this country. And I won't read you every piece of an excerpt from his autobiography, but he talked about coming together with a group of labor leaders and labor organizations to erect a statue right in front of the governor's residence, a bronze sculpture of a steelworker. And many of you have seen it and you've heard about it. But the reason he put it there is to remind us who built this country. It reminds us the people who helped us win World War II and preserve our freedom. And so on a day like today, when we're talking about the issue of trade, we've got to be mindful of that. We've got to be mindful that every step that we take along this process of debating and arguing about a trade agreement has to be focused on workers and wages here in Pennsylvania. They're going to be my first and only concerns when it comes to this agreement. So we have to consider first the so-called TPA, the Trade Promotion Authority. That's the vehicle, or that's the rule book or instruction book on how the trade agreement gets considered. Trade Promotion Authority is a very significant part of this debate. And I have real concerns about it because unlike most of the other things that the Congress can do, Trade Promotion Authority, when it's enacted, limits or circumscribes what Congress can do. And it also puts a trade agreement on what's called a fast track. So it gets consideration that other pieces of legislation don't get. Some would argue that's a good thing. I would argue that it's an area of great concern. So the first debate on trade, even before you get to the trade agreement itself, is the Trade Promotion Authority debate. That's the first vote we're going to cast. We had a vote in the Finance Committee a week ago Wednesday. My side lost. I voted against moving that Trade Promotion Authority forward, but we lost. But we're not done yet, because that Trade Promotion Authority has to be considered on the floor of the Senate. Then eventually we'll get to vote on the trade agreement itself. But I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes about on the background here, because I think it's important. First of all, when it comes to Trade Promotion Authority, and then ultimately the other acronym, instead of TPA, TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, that's the agreement, that's the trade agreement. What does it mean? Well, it means that the United States, if it were to be signed into law, that trade agreement, we would be in an agreement with 11 other nations, okay? From our hemisphere all the way to the Far East. We would be in a trade agreement which would affect 40% of the world's gross domestic product. By far the biggest trade agreement in American history. Now, we remember NAFTA. We remember the debate about it. We remember the concerns that people like Leo and others raised at the time. I was just starting out in politics. In fact, I started out just as NAFTA was already completed. But as the Auditor General of our state, I gave a speech one day where part of that speech raised great concerns about NAFTA. I think I proved to be right, but I think there were a lot of people who were right about the concerns that we had about NAFTA. Why were we concerned? Well, a couple of reasons. Number one is we were concerned that NAFTA would lead to job loss. Well, here's what the data shows on the North American Free Trade Agreement, which, by the way, is about a third of the size of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement that we're going to be debating soon. Here's the track record. After NAFTA, when you look at the time period from 1993 to 2002, 525,094 workers certified as displaced by the Department of Labor statistics. So that's more than 500,000 people displaced because of that one trade agreement. So we have to wonder, if the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement were in effect, which is 3 times larger than NAFTA, should we not have the same concerns about worker dislocation or job loss? I would argue the answer to that question is yes. Okay, so that's one question about job loss. How about the trade deficit with our country? One of the biggest concerns is that trade deficits leads to job loss. We know that. How about Mexico? Mexico is part of both agreements, okay? They're our neighbor. Here's the data on that. The trade deficit with Mexico increased from 1993 to 2010 by roughly $10 billion. So the trade deficit went up when we want it to come down. We know the trade deficits lead to job loss. How about China? I've asserted for a long time, and I think the data is very clear, that China has repeatedly cheated on its currency left and right all the time. Now, the administration in Washington would say we've had some good results lately on China's currency manipulation. I would argue we haven't done near enough to try to stop China from manipulating its currency, which undermines our workers and makes it easier for them to outcompete us when they cheat on the rules. Here's the number on China. The trade deficit with China in 1993 was about $10 billion. The number in 2010 was $28 billion. So almost 3 times higher between 1993 and 2010. So we are very concerned about the impact of a trade agreement on wages, creating downward pressure on wages. We know that NAFTA had an adverse impact on Pennsylvania jobs. By one estimate, and this is the Economic Policy Institute, says that Pennsylvania lost a net 26,300 jobs due to the trade deficit with Mexico, and this is as of May of 2011. So are we concerned about wages? You bet we are. Very concerned. We're also concerned about when you have a trade agreement with countries that have a very low minimum wage, that makes it easier for them to undermine our workers, to undermine our wage growth because of the agreement. What are we talking about here? Well, we know that of the 11 countries in this agreement, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, 8 of the 11 countries in the agreement have minimum wages lower than the United States of America, and 7 of the 8 have minimum wages below $3 an hour, okay? In the United States of America, we're at $7.25. That's too low. I just co-sponsored legislation the other day to get it to $12 an hour by 2020, okay? So we've got a long way to go on our minimum wage to get it from $7 or $7.25 up to 12. We might be in an agreement, a trade agreement, with countries that have minimum wages of $3 or lower an hour. Now, someone's got to explain to me how that is good for our workers, to be in an agreement with folks who can underbid us because they have such low minimum wages. Someone's got to explain to me how an agreement like that is going to help stop the pressure on wages going down, which we've seen in the last 25 years. So, as I've said more than once, on so many of these agreements, whether it was NAFTA in the 90s or the recent agreement a few years ago with South Korea, it seems that every time, despite a lot of promises, a trade agreement is proposed, Pennsylvania gets the short end of the stick. The short end of the stick when it comes to wages, and the short end of the stick in terms of worker protections. If we had an agreement that we were debating where all 11 countries agreed with us that we should have high labor standards and allow people to organize and collectively bargain and not literally be killed in the streets like they have been in Mexico. Labor leaders assassinated in places like Mexico because they're trying to organize. That's not the labor standard that we want here. We should insist that these other countries have high labor standards, that they protect the environment. Any company can underbid you if they can pollute the water. Any company can underbid you if they're allowed to do whatever they want when it comes to the environment in their country. And finally, we should only go engage in trade agreements with folks that will insist that they won't steal our intellectual property or use currency in a way that's not just manipulative, but it's cheating on the rules. But yet one of the countries in this agreement is Japan. Japan has also manipulated its currency, which costs us jobs.